Hi, Caroline. Thank you so much for being here with us. We're going to talk privacy. And I think that that's a really big, probably, concern and keeps a lot of people...
Not a concern.
Not a concern. Nothing to be worried about. Well, why do you say that? Not a concern.
It's a competitive advantage.
Okay. You want to explain? Why do you say that?
Well, you know what? Actually, consumers today, they do care about their privacy, right? They expect that businesses will handle their data with care. So I think actually any company that cares about privacy, that embeds privacy into the design of their products, is only going to be more successful.
Okay, great. Well, you are from Belgium, and Apple's CEO Tim Cook was in Brussels a few weeks ago, and he made some really sort of fierce comments about data privacy. He said that personal data is being weaponized against us with military efficiency. Do you agree with that?
Wow. Do you?
Well,
it's a very powerful statement. Well, privacy and data protection are really human rights. So at the end of the day, it comes down to the question, do we want to do the real thing, the right thing, or not? Mm-hmm. And so obviously we believe at Mastercard that data must be handled with care, with respect for the individual. But if that doesn't happen, it can definitely feel that way. And I think it's really the time to reframe the conversation around how we, companies, we handle personal information. You know, when we build new products and services, we should really ask ourselves important questions. What is the impact on individuals? Is it fair? Is it ethical? And I've heard ethics being one of the topics that has been discussed this morning. And so treating individuals and their data with respect, building those ethical products, and being open about our data practices. I think that should be really at the center of everything we do. Mm-hmm. And obviously, we have to remember, and I know we have been speaking about AI, about the key benefits that data brings to our lives in terms of more convenience, but also it can solve major societal issues in environment, in education, in safety. It has lots of possibilities, but obviously it requires enhanced corporate responsibility or a new form of accountability. Mm-hmm. So privacy and innovation can definitely come together, but we have to put people first. And then let me wrap up with another question that was raised by Tim Cook in Brussels 2 weeks ago. And I think that summarizes a little bit the debate. What is the world we want to live in? Mm-hmm. I will leave it like that.
Okay. Well, he also took that opportunity to praise the GDPR, which is the new privacy law in Europe. Do you want to just I'm sure you've got your sort of quick summary of GDPR down by now. Do you want to just sort of, for people not familiar with it, explain what it is and sort of its importance?
Has anybody not heard about the GDPR? That's my question. Yes, I have eaten, slept, drunk the GDPR. I know it by heart from A to Z. GDPR, so it's a new law in Europe, and at the end of the day, what it does, it puts individuals back in control of their data. So it gives people new privacy rights. For example, people are really empowered to get information about how their personal information is being collected, used, and shared with third parties. People have a right to get a copy of their data, to ask for their data to be corrected, and even deleted, and that's the right to be forgotten.
Right. So you're so well versed in this. What do you see as I'm curious how you would sort of grade this law, because it was really thought to be sort of a first of its kind, and it's really been the model for more regulation that we're seeing proposed around the world. Yeah. How would you score it? I mean, what are the benefits that you see of GDPR, and where do you see some weaknesses?
Sure. So actually, we see a lot of benefits of the GDPR, believe it or not. And actually, for us, for Mastercard, it has not really been a revolution. It has been more like an evolution, because we have invested heavily in privacy since long, because it's so core to our business model, right? We have to make sure that we handle data with safety, but also in a responsible way. So let me give you maybe 3 benefits. First, GDPR provides harmonization in Europe, because in the past we were facing with a patchwork of different privacy laws, which really increased the cost and the complexity of doing business. And so having to deal with just one law for all activities across Europe, this is priceless. Mm-hmm. GDPR has also been an opportunity to review our products and our services and to really embed privacy into the design by default, because privacy cannot be an afterthought. It has to be built into the product development process. And that's the concept of privacy by design, I'm sure that most of you have heard of. And actually, that concept has been born in Canada. So very, very topical. Now, what does that mean in practice? Well, it means that it requires strong collaboration across multiple teams in your organizations to develop together those fully consumer-centric solutions. So if you are about to launch a new product or service that relies on data, and you have not yet connected with your privacy team, it's probably time to make friends. And then in terms of third benefits, the GDPR has also been key to raise privacy awareness. And you cannot have effective data protection if it's not fully ingrained into the culture of your organization. So privacy has to become the responsibility of every employee handling data, right? And so we've taken that as an opportunity to educate the whole organization about privacy, going from our CEO to product development teams, sales teams, everyone. And I think it has paid off. And actually, GDPR was included in our CEO's key objectives for 2018.
Okay. And what about the weaknesses? Where do you see those popping up as you implement?
I'm not quite sure about weaknesses, but definitely there have been many, many challenges on the way. So let me give you at least one. The GDPR requires companies to update all the contracts that they have with customers, with partners, to include specific clauses, so very prescriptive language, and to clarify the roles and responsibilities of each party handling data. Well, you know what? Actually, at Mastercard, we have tens of thousands of customers and partners, so it has really been a mammoth task. And for each of those customers, we offer multiple products and solutions for which, obviously, we have different types of responsibilities. So it has been a little bit painful. But we made it.
Right. The GDPR has, like I mentioned, been a model that other countries are now considering adopting. California has passed its own law. Brazil, I believe so too. Yes. In the US, there was a proposal last week, and when I told you about it earlier today, I feel like you're a little exhausted by all the different regulation that's popping up these days, and obviously it's a huge challenge for you to handle this patchwork of laws. But there's a new proposal in the US by an Oregon lawmaker who, his idea really stood out because he wanted to jail CEOs for up to 20 years if they knowingly misled regulators. How do you feel about the idea of holding CEOs or other executives personally responsible for these types of violations?
Well, I'm not going to support that, otherwise I'm going to fire today. I'm not quite sure that we should go as far as that. I think today in the US, we face a patchwork of different privacy laws because we have a really sectorial approach to privacy. So we have specific privacy rules for the financial sector, for children, for the health sector. Then there are, I think, 54 data breach notification laws. And you know what? It may have worked very well in the past, but it's time to move away from this fragmented legal landscape and to adopt a comprehensive privacy law in the US. First of all, that would also bring harmonization, which means reduce cost and complexity of doing business. But then it's also the right thing to do. We need to go for a strong framework that really offers strong privacy protections and at the same time that enable businesses to use data for more innovation. So, I mean, even in Europe, they haven't really made CEOs jailable. So.
In that regard, at least, yeah. I'm going to ask for questions in a bit, but you mentioned AI, and obviously the advancement of artificial intelligence and machine learning requires lots and lots of data. So as we see these laws take shape and maybe more consumers take control of their data or opt out of sharing it, I mean, what are those two forces seem to be in conflict. I mean, how do you at Mastercard think about balancing the advancement of AI with protecting consumers' data?
Well, they shouldn't be in conflict, right? And so at Mastercard, we used artificial intelligence in particular to make our network safer and to keep our cardholders more secure. So for example, we use AI to tell the difference between a good and trusted user, cardholder, and a fraudster. We want to make sure that you are who you say you are. We also use AI to build our fraud models and to detect fraudulent from a non-fraudulent transaction. Now, when we use AI, we do so obviously with an understanding of our responsibility as a trusted data stewards. But this being said, AI is a disruptive technology. We've heard it. And as any new technology, it creates immense value for everyone, for consumers, for businesses, for society. But it could cause tension with privacy rules. So I'm not talking about conflicts, but tensions. Mm-hmm. And so one of the key challenges with AI is that it's harder and harder for human beings to be engaged in the decision-making process, right? So with AI, we have new data sources, new algorithms that are being used and combined in new ways within a machine, and that could make decisions that impact people. And sometimes that creates new risks, including discrimination, and I know we've discussed that this morning. And so key questions are really, how can they know about what's going on? So how can they understand that? And if there are some decisions that impact them, can they challenge that? Can they seek redress? These are very hard questions. And I think today we have not only an opportunity, but also an obligation to develop a framework that would enable the use of AI in a responsible and ethical way, right? But no one can do that alone, so it really requires partnerships. And at Mastercard, we call that collaborative AI. Mm-hmm. And we are engaged, as IBM and many other players, we are engaged in conversations, in a broader dialogue with our customers, but also with other industry players and with governments, policymakers, and regulators to try to get it right.
Right. Are there any questions? We have one right here and a second right there. One moment.
Hi, I'm Edna Conway. I'm from Cisco, and I'm the security side of keeping your data secure. So
Good.
Right, we must work together. There's no doubt about it.
You have to be friends.
I'm really enthused about AI, and I'd like to encourage everybody to stop calling it artificial intelligence and start calling it enhanced intelligence, because I do think there's a human element to it. But what we are doing, certainly many of us as companies, is informing our data stewards across the full spectrum of our employee base. I'd like to think out loud with you about what you are doing to talk about consumer education, because I can't tell you the number of people who have come up to me and said, thank you, GDPR. Every time I go into something now, I have to accept the cookies each and every time. And I look at that as a gift. I'm making an empowered decision, but not every consumer is aware of their own empowerment or appreciates it. How are we addressing that?
Yeah, thank you. Very good question. So first of all, to put things into context, the cookies come from an even other regulation in Europe, and so we have like a lot of complexity. It comes from the e-privacy directive, which is another story for another day. But yes, I think there is really need to educate consumers about their rights, about what's going on. And so I think that's actually a challenge today. How do we make sure that consumers understand, for example, the role of each party in our complex connected ecosystem? You know, who is doing what? How do we make sure that they understand AI, how AI works, what data goes in, what data goes out, what are the potential impacts on them? So I think there's a need to get better at telling our story, at explaining the controls that actually some companies have implemented. So we have, for example, very strong anonymization solutions that we implement, but how do we explain that to consumers and the benefits that they can get? So I think that's actually a challenge today, and we have to get better because the world is becoming more and more complex. So it's going to be even more important that consumers understand, and obviously that they understand their rights. So thanks for the question.
This is such a fast-moving space, and challenges clearly remain, but we are out of time. That went by so fast. Yes, but thank you so much for joining us. I feel like you might get bombarded with questions later today, but we're